Good. Hello.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How
Good.
about you?
I'm okay. I'm good. Good too. Good too.
Yeah. Mm,
Yeah. Just we're entering August and it's going to be a propitious month for us. We're going to have a lot of decisions that will showcase what's happening for us for the next few years, probably. So,
it's an interesting time.
yes, it is.
Very dynamic and unpredictable.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I'm up for it. I know you are too.
I mean, what else? What other choice do you have?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
It really is interesting because you don't know what to expect.
No, no, there's so many changes and so many possibilities, and you just have to wait and see, and be fluid enough to respond to whatever.
And the only item that is close enough to be interested in and give attention to is who Kamala's going to select as vice president.
You have a favorite?
Pete Buttigieg, I think, but I don't really know because I don't know the other people. I just know him and I like him.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
but the governor of a state would seem to be better than him because of the practice that he would have at governing.
Yeah.
Because Pete hasn't had that. He's just a really good guy and smart.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
what kind of thinking do you have about it?
I kind of like Mark Kelly.
Okay,
He is Gabby Gifford's husband.
he's what?
Gabby Gifford's husband.
Oh, the one that was shot.
Yes. So they have a strong anti-gun stance. He's been a senator for several years now. And he's been very supportive of his wife, so he can support women. He's not in competition with them.
Nice.
Yeah. I think a con is that he's a bit older,
Uh-huh.
and that may not be bad. I mean, it's young and old, but still, we're kind of moving into a young thing. So
How old is he?
I don't know, but he looks much older. He's balding and gray.
Oh, okay. Well, what's his
So,
last name?
Kelly.
Okay.
And the other one that I think would be a good choice is the governor of Georgia, because Georgia's a swing state. He would bring that. Mike Kelly comes from Arizona, and so he would help with Arizona. Um, and I want to say Gordon, but I'm not sure that's his name. Uh, but he's the governor. He has governing experience. He comes from a swing state, and he's been very strong. And I mean, as a Democrat elected in a pretty red state, that speaks well also. So
Huh?
those are two thoughts.
Yeah.
Um,
It's not only an interesting time, it's a fragile time.
yeah,
It seems fragile
yeah.
just because everything's just kind of tossed up in the air. Don't know
Well,
where
and
it's
the
gonna.
consequences are significant on either side.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I'm looking forward to a debate between Trump and
Oh,
if he has the balls to do it.
well, he's not a debate. He's a production. You just watch him. He has not. I mean, there's no debate.
I know. Well, that's what would be so obvious.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's obvious to us that that's true, and the Magna folks just like his entertainment. So I mean, I guess it's something we have to do, but it's not anything that I see in this particular case as being particularly significant one way or the other. I
Oh,
don't think it's going to change anybody's mind. And he's got nothing to offer that's new. It's
no.
all old stuff. So
My only thing about the debate is that he would just fall flat. You know,
well,
it
yeah,
seems,
I mean, fall flat depends on your perspective. He's fallen flat for those on the left side forever, but he doesn't for the right side. They don't care what he says. They just want to be entertained, and he entertains them just fine. So,
that's true.
it's like there's no need for substance from his perspective for his base.
Right.
So there isn't any.
Yeah. It has
I mean,
those.
it would be interesting to see Kamala in that, but it's like, I don't know. It's, I guess he's not a worthy adversary. He's not anybody that would really test her because we already know what he's going to do. And it's nothing about her at all. It was just how she would handle such a situation. But God, I hope that's not normal. So,
Yeah, you're right about that though, because it wouldn't prove anything. It wouldn't. It it would be a farce.
yeah, it is a farce. Exactly.
Farce.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was assumed that she'll have to do it at least once.
Yeah,
Yeah. Because they have to see somebody other than Biden in that situation.
yeah.
Our folks do. So, yeah.
Oh,
But yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting. I mean, I've been actually astonished to see the surge of energy that her potential candidacy has created. I mean, it's amazing. It
it
just
is me.
blows me away. Young folks are really excited. Voter registration is up 700% in the age range of 18 to 34.
What percentage?
700.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So there's a
Oh,
huge surge. I mean, she's really energized the party.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
So
amazing. That makes me watery.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, it changes the game entirely because these are younger folks who have kind of opted out because it was an old person's game and now it's not.
Yeah,
So that's huge. I mean, that's really huge. So yeah, it changes things tremendously.
yeah.
Hmm.
Well, it'll all unfold.
And it's only 100 days.
100 days. Okay. It's kind of scary too.
Well, I don't feel as scared now as I did before.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, with all the new energy, because that was the big thing, getting people to vote. I had friends who just wouldn't vote for Biden because of Gaza, and they were, just willing to, they didn't know what they were going to do, and they weren't going to vote Trump, but they didn't want to vote Biden. And so now that's kind of gone, and she's got a much stronger stance on Israel than Biden had. She doesn't have Netanyahu to placate. She doesn't have a relationship with him. And so he's more on, and you could see it in the interviews. I mean, he's kind of on his guard. He can't play the gee, we're friends game that he can play with Biden. I mean, he and Biden go back for a long way. So she just does not have that. And she's saying, yes, I support Israel. And no, I don't support the war.
Right.
And so you're going to have to figure something out because I'm not going to just give you stuff because we're friends.
Right.
So
Good.
yeah, so that will be a very different stance. And I think that will appeal way more to the younger folks and to those people who have issues with Gaza. So yeah, so I think, yeah, Yep.
Yeah, we can't push the river. We don't even know what the
And
hell the river is.
she's been a big part of the bill that they passed environmentally. So she's got a really strong environmental stance. And she's very much about using the laws to make sure that things happen.
Uh-huh.
So that sounds good as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's dominating. I mean, the political thing is
Yeah.
dominant.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
And it's been interesting too, because Trump is so good at getting publicity.
yeah.
That's part of the reason he's as crazy as he is, because people can't believe what he just said and they have to share it. So, I mean, it really works his favor to be just stupid and crazy and all that kind of stuff, because people are just going, oh, and that's fine. He gets free publicity. He doesn't pay for any of that, but he's in the news all the time. And suddenly it's Harris that's in the news all the time because she's such a big upset. And that's been a problem
Well, for him.
for him. Yes. And he's now the old guy. So all the old conversation that they've been having, oh, well, he can't keep his mind on things, and he doesn't use his words right, and he can't remember stuff. Well, there you are.
That's good.
It's
It's good.
true.
It is true.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, he's not competent
No, no,
to
no.
be anything but a clown
Yeah.
and a disruptor.
Yeah. And he can certainly be very destructive, which, and one of the things that concerns me now is that we're so focused on Trump as being the issue, and he's got a whole machine behind him now, people who have taken advantage of who he is, and they're building stuff that we didn't have before. So they're being very conscious and very clear. They don't have a figurehead yet if he's gone, but they've got lots of strategies to put their people in places where they need their people. And if we're not paying attention to that, we're going to get schnookered anyway.
Hmm.
Yeah, I just read an incredible article about that really detailed all the new groups that are coming up to do certain things, to disrupt this industry, to disrupt that industry, to take over these places. And so he's really generated enough of interest and money to create a machine that didn't exist before. And that machine is way more intelligent than he has ever been. So it's going to be a long-term struggle. This is not over just because he's gone by any means.
It 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 sounds to me like there is a force behind him that has nothing to do with him.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
yeah,
They just used him.
yeah, just to disassemble.
Well, he was able to take all the things that they are talking about, the 2025 project, and articulate them in a way that people could hear and not give credence to, because he was not somebody they were afraid of, because they disparaged him and thought he was stupid and dumb and all these things. They didn't really pay attention to the things he said. So he could talk to the masses very clearly about what he wanted. And the other side just went, my God, this guy is nuts, instead of saying, look at what they're doing. And so he seeded all these things that were hidden before and now are pretty much in plain sight. The 2025 project is so clear about what they want to do. And they're putting all of the mechanisms in place to make it happen without Trump. Trump won't do any of that. It would be good if he's in the White House, because then they wouldn't have to fight the White House. But there are lots of places to do stuff that have nothing to do with the White House. getting judges and governors and those kinds of things in place have nothing to do with the White House. So they're really putting that mechanism in place very consciously with real clear ideas about what they're doing and how they're doing it. That is for me very scary because it's all like legal, you know, because we allow people to do different things. And if they're not overtly treasonous or violent, then we don't say anything about it. And they're not. They're very legal and very proper, and their languaging is excellent. I mean, I get some of the Republican stuff, and I can tell you, if you didn't understand what they were saying, you would go right. It just makes perfect sense. It's like, yep, I could back that. I could absolutely make sense to me. And you just have to dig under it and understand what they're really doing, because they say one thing and they do another. So they've got a language down which really hides a lot of what they're doing. And it sounds different than it really is, like they're all for freedom. Well, bullshit, they're not for freedom at all. But they activate the aspect of people that doesn't want to be manipulated or controlled. And they call that freedom, but it's not, it's irresponsibility. There's a difference, but they're using that desire to be irresponsible as a label for freedom. And there's energy there. People have an emotional context around that, and they get fired up about that because, yeah, I don't want anybody telling me what to do. Yeah, I want the ability to do that. So, yeah, I want freedom. Well, that's not freedom. That's not what freedom is about. And freedom for other people, oh, yeah, they can do what they want to, but I have to do what I want. And if that hurts you, that's too bad. That's not my problem, because I get to do what I want to do. And that's the part of the juice of all of this that gets people emotionally involved and puts their heads on hiatus because they're so entrenched on protecting themselves or being egoic, evolved with themselves instead of understanding their responsibilities to the whole and that kind of stuff. It's just not there.
I want to share an experience that I had yesterday. What's the name of the guy that's Trump's running mate?
Vance.
Vance. Well,
Yeah.
what's his initials? His first name.
JC or something.
JD Vance.
Yeah, JD.
Like it was a trip. He said something, and the way that he said it, or what he said it, he talked about having a woman in the home, he made reference to a female figure. Well, he was talking about the ideal home, I guess, but it affected me in such a way. What happened is I felt such compassion for him because I realized that he didn't have in his own life experience what he is proposing that there should be in this perfect family home kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I felt such compassion for him because I realized he didn't have that when he was growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And but it was a trip for me.
Yeah, no, he's pushing, women pregnant with babies all the time and keeping babies to term under gunpoint.
Say that again.
Under gunpoint.
What the first? What
That
you say?
women would keep their pregnancies under gunpoint. And it's not about the women, it's about the babies. We want to make sure the babies are okay.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just, no, he's one of the authors in the 2025 project. So he's part of that group.
Yeah. JD Vance, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's written, it's interesting because he wrote another book, and I can't remember the title of it, but I do remember when it came out, and it wasn't like this at all. It had a lot of compassion in it. It was his story, and it was much more warm and opening in that. But he's, people have seen the opportunity for power through all this stuff. And so they just give up everything else and get on the bandwagon. And they're perfectly willing to change their tunes if they feel that it's going to get them a powerful place in the new world that they're creating. So, yeah, I mean, you just can't trust what they say. Yeah.
It was a trip for me to hear him, to feel him, to hear what he had to say about the woman in the home, but in a context and in a way that I felt compassion for him because he didn't have that.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's trying to define and impose and make the perfect family, which is about the babies. It's not about the woman.
No, not at all.
He has no respect for women, I don't think.
Well, yeah, I've not seen him with his wife. It would be really curious to do that. But
it was a trip for me last night. I mean, I went on a trip from what he said, and I had tears, and I felt such compassion for him. But it's my own woundedness. His woundedness tapped into my woundedness by not having the ideal.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know? So interesting, the dynamics of this.
yes.
And the compassion I felt for him. And the touching my own woundedness by through my compassion for him. Like, Lord, this is interesting. I haven't read the 2025 thing. You've read it?
Oh no, it's 900 pages.
Oh, and he
So
wrote it?
no, he didn't write it, but he's part of the group. It came from the Heritage Foundation.
That's right, Heritage Foundation, right?
Yeah, but you can Google it, and there's all sorts of synopsises and lists of things and stuff, so you can get a good sense of it without having to read the whole 900 pages. But yeah.
What's your take on it?
Oh, it's dystopian.
Dystopian.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally destructive of every kind of living that we're used to. There would be nothing that's without control by the elite who are elected by this group to control it all. It's all about taking money and power. That's all it is in every aspect of life. So, yeah.
It's interesting and a little scary that
Oh, it's very scary. I mean, it's very has lots of um ties to Nazism. So Trump is really a fan of Hitler. Um, and you can see a lot of his, I mean, the whole thing when he got his ear hit, that, raising fist, it's very Nazi.
yeah.
Yeah. So he's got a lot of those mannerisms that he's taken from there that he uses his way, just so much. Yeah. So you see a lot of that in the 2025 project too. I mean, they're doing, there was a movie. Oh, and it was the story of um one of the heads of the Gestapo whose house was right next door to the camps. I mean, there was a fence between them, that they were that close. And how his family lived in the shadow of that without knowing it, without paying any attention to it. And the banality of that evil, how subtle and quiet it is, and how matter of fact it is. And it just does what it does without menace, as we think of menace. It's not this aggressive, negative kind of stuff at all. It was just a really brilliant film, very slow, very quiet, and just chilling when you step back and realize what you'd witnessed, that these people are living right next door to all this horror and making use of that in their own life without recognizing it at all. And that's kind of what they're doing, that they're setting this up to be like that you can have the good life without ever being aware of the pain you're causing all around you, because it's all just been showcased and managed and set up so that that's possible for you. And if you're on that side, it's fine. If you're not on that side, it's not fine at all. But you don't have to pay attention to that. It's not anything you have to engage yourself with, which is what makes it possible. Yeah.
I really appreciate your consciousness of this. Because it's scary to me.
Yes. Yes. I mean, it's so insidious. It's so insidious. And they use, all those things. The emotional triggers, all of that kind of stuff, tapping into your own wounds, to your own experiences and all of that, and lifting them up and saying, see, we're going to take care of this. Yeah, they are, but in such a negative way. And it's being able to see the whole picture, because they package it very, very well. I mean, that's the whole thing. It's packaged in humor. It's packaged in ridiculousness. It's the people around Trump. The stories that I've heard about his rallies and that kind of stuff is their parties. These people are so happy to be with other people who are like them, where all of their negativity is out. They don't have to hide it, and it's okay that they don't like Blacks. It's okay that they don't feel comfortable with all this. It's okay. So they feel comfortable and warm and included and part of a family for the first time. They're not shifted to the fringes where they have been by the Democrats, who said you shouldn't do this. This is bad behavior. So they're not feeling shamed and bad. They're feeling welcomed. And that's a hard thing to give up. That is the biggest glue to the Magna folks of anything, is this feeling of finally having a home and a place. I've heard people who have been in it and then gotten out of it, and they talk about that, how to be included is so special, to really feel like you're fine just the way you are is a wonderful feeling. And you don't have to be responsible. You don't have to care for those people you don't like. You don't have to be nice to people that you find uncomfortable and weird. You can say they're uncomfortable and weird and I don't want them around me. And everybody goes, yeah, that feels good.
I wish I had the language, well, the understanding and the language. I've got the sense of it that is so screwed up. I mean, it's so screwed up. I mean, I came under the spell last night.
Yes.
I did.
Yeah.
because through my compassion for him, because he didn't have the kind of family that you need to have to be okay, and neither did I. I've done a lot of work, a lot of therapy, and a lot of 12-step, and a lot of, all that stuff. But I came under the spell last night.
Yeah.
And even took it like I was with a friend, and I was sharing with her my experience that was triggered by him, and the ideal family that he was the what we all need, what we all didn't have, or what we all, and I found myself saying that this could be conscious evolution. How the fuck could I say that? But I did.
Mm.
Because I came under that spell. And so I used the language that I'm used to say, well, maybe this is just, the evolution of humanity, the healing of humanity, Whoa,
Mm.
no, it's not at all.
Mm.
But that's kind of scary. I mean, I'm a
Oh,
little.
they're not dumb folks. There's nothing dumb about them. I mean, I was so, oh God, and he did the contract for America when he was in Congress. And I know you'd recognize his name, and I can't think about it. I can't think of what it is. He was part of the World Future Society, which I was a part of at the same time. And I was so astounded that a person could come out of that environment and be so evil. But they were just there to learn how to do the things they wanted to learn. So they took the things that make us healthy and twist them. So they're very educated. They truly get, and they just use it for their own purposes. It's really hard to understand people like that. I mean, I can't claim to do that. Newt Gingrich, that's his name. And I mean, he started the destruction of Congress by eliminating funding for AIDS. No congressman can read all the bills they get. I mean, these bills are huge. They're like feet thick in paper. They can't read all that. So they have aides who would read it and then tell them what was in the bills. That's gone. So these guys have no idea what they're voting for. Zilch. They have to listen to somebody and just trust whatever they say. And the only people who are talking about a bill are the people who are writing it. So they're not telling you everything in the bill. They're telling you what they want you to hear. And that's all they have, because they have no money for the people who would take the time to read them. And that was Newt. He took that out of Congress. He eliminated that funding. It's being that kind of strategic. They understand how to undercut the system so that you don't have the resources you need in order to function well. And then well-meaning people do the best they can. And it isn't good enough. That's all. I mean, you have to have resources. That's why we have all these laws in the books about healthy food and inspecting factories and all that kind of stuff. And we have no money for anybody to do it. So nobody's doing it. I mean, it's amazing we don't die. It really is, because they aren't inspecting. They don't have the people. They don't have the money to hire the people that it takes to go through factories to see what they're actually doing. If somebody complains, they can go look. That's it. I mean, they've so undercut the country. This whole thing about taxes is a way to eviscerate the government. If the government has no money, the government can't do anything. And we really saw that during COVID, where the government didn't have the money to do some of the things that the government needed to do. It didn't have the money. It just wasn't there. because we're trying to get rid of taxes. They're working really hard to eliminate taxes. The people who have the money to pay the taxes are not being taxed. The people who don't have money to pay taxes are being taxed. Well, they simply don't have the money that the government needs. There's nowhere for it to come from. So they make sure that the government doesn't have the money to function. And then guess what? It's the government's fault that things aren't being done right, that they're not taking care of us, that they're not really spending the money correctly. All of that's camouflage. It's just all camouflage.
They, how would you name?
Republicans is how I would name them now. But I'm sure that there's people on the Democratic side who are playing the game too. I can't believe that it's exclusive Republican, but the Republicans have really made it a, a very well-engineered social structure. I mean, and now they're really claiming it. That's the whole thing. They're really claiming that they're doing this. But it's been in the works since the 40s, frankly. Reagan came in and totally upended things. I mean, he was the start of a lot of that. And it's not like he was the smartest guy either. He's like Trump, just not more personable. He was funny, he was glib, he was, engaging. People were familiar with him. He already had a name. He was an actor. He was, respected in that profession. And he was able to articulate things in a way that people accepted, that were palatable. And yeah, so he got a lot of stuff through that shouldn't have been. I mean, he took off all the solar stuff on the White House and just did all sorts of things just because that is what they want to have happen.
Why would they take solar off the White House?
Oh, I don't remember what the language was, but he did. Yeah, Carter put it up and he took it out. Yeah. I mean, it's just, yeah.
What would you call that frame of reference, that mindset?
It's self-destructive is what it is.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, it really is self-destructive because they are destroying everything that would make life happen on the planet. So they support everything. Let's do more chemicals because yay, those people who have money should get more money. It's self-destructive. It truly is self-destructive. Yeah.
Do you have an inkling where that from what that emerged, from where that emerged? How did that mindset formulate in American consciousness of certain people?
For me, there's a connection to that mindset, to the bitterness that some people feel about their own experience. So if I had to do it, you're going to do it too. And even though I know it hurt me and it wounded me and it made my life miserable, I want you to share that misery so you know what I went through. I don't want to spare you from it. I want you to share my pain.
I want us to be comrades in it.
Yeah. And you're not better than I am. So I want you just like me. I want you to have there's really that's part of that twisted. You can't be not angry. You can't not have the same pain that I have. You've got to have that same pain. I don't want to spare you from it. I don't want to protect you from it. I want you involved in it just like me. You're going to be just as nasty and angry about it because you shared it as I am. I can't believe you could go through what I've gone through and not feel what I'm feeling. So I want to justify all of my negativity because of my experience. And see, now what I've gone through. So we're together. We're going to make everybody just as miserable as we are. It's really weird. Yeah. Yeah. There's no heart in it. That's all I can say. Very twisted heart. Very twisted heart.
And what I'm picking up in what you're saying, the context is now we're bedfellows. Now we're companions. Now
Yeah.
we're comrades.
Comrades in arms, yes. But not understanding the self-destructive. I mean, I feel compassion for Trump because of his dad and his mentor, both of whom were so nasty to him and really taught him that you don't have any feelings for anybody. The only thing that matters is how much money. That's the only thing I care about from you, is if you're making money, man, then I think you're a real man. Other than that, you're not. And he was just so beaten up with that that's his whole life. You know, he really, the whole narcissistic thing is they want to be loved. They want to be loved. They want to be good people so bad. And they've been taught that being good people is hurting others, that what they do to be good is hurting others. And they don't see that because, you know, that's their path to approval. And so they can't be wrong. They can't recognize their mistakes because that undercuts that whole ethos. I mean, it's just undercuts the foundation of being a good person that they've been taught and come to expect. I've seen it in other people in that same kind of way, that they want to be good so bad that whatever path they decide on for goodness, whatever that looks like, there's no going back. There's no options, because that is the salvation. That's the thing that's going to make them good in this person's eyes who's never ever going to see it. And it's just sad. It's really sad. It's really sad.
Can you recall another time in history where that frame of reference, that mindset, that way of thinking was dominant as it is becoming dominant now?
Well, I think Nazi Germany and Rwanda are both really good examples of that, where it was very much publicized how to be good, what good looked like. Good did all these things. And anybody who didn't do those things was bad and should be gotten rid of. So there's the whole ethos in Nazi Germany. I just did a whole article about this actually. In Nazi Germany, you have to be productive. Being productive means you're a worthwhile person. Oh, so who isn't productive? Kids, old people, sick people, just people with disabilities. Those aren't productive people, so they're not worthless. They're worthless. And there was a whole active program in Germany getting rid of those folks. Trump has talked about, you know, people with disabilities should just die. He took that right out of the Nazi handbook.
You're saying he said that?
Mm-hmm.
I want to inform myself. Where did you get that? Did he, is it in a document somewhere?
Oh, it's in a spot. Yeah, he doesn't write, he just talks. So it's in a speech he made at some point.
Right. But
yeah.
But researching Nazi Germany mindset framework thinking would help.
Oh, I can send you. There's an article that a guy wrote on Nazi Germany and narcissism. And I used it as a basis for an article that I did. I can send you that reference.
Please.
But that's not going to tell you what Trump said. So you could probably just Google Trump and disabilities, and that statement would come up, I would think, because it was a public statement that he made some talk.
This is fascinating. And we have to get hold of it. We have
Yeah,
to get hold of it.
yeah. No, if you're not familiar with past, you get to repeat it.
Ah,
Yeah.
I really appreciate what you're saying. It's very important, the perspective that you have, the how you're how you're lumping it together and referencing how it's happened in the past, like Nazi Germany.
Well, you know what's interesting? Um, what I first One of the things that I noticed, which I can also see in that, but I did not see it earlier, is when was it Enron? It wasn't Enron. It was the energy company in California. Oh, it was Enron, not Exxon. It was Enron. And
Enron.
when Enron was in California and when it exploded, and the stories came out about young men in the back room laughing because old people wouldn't have their heat and that kind of stuff because they just jacked up the price and they knew they couldn't afford it. But they were making money and they were so pleased they were making money. And isn't it funny all the things we can do to others to make this happen? And when Enron was broken up, those people went to work in other places
People
and
what? Those people.
went to work in other places, in other companies, and they took that attitude with them. And you could start to see it show up in PepsiCo, in Frito-Lay, in other companies where those folks went. All of a sudden, that attitude was living there. And the same thing happened in Nazi Germany. When people left, they went to Argentina and South America and different countries. And you can see that there in those cultures too, because they kept the same beliefs. They just left and moved to another place. And while they didn't have power, they had those beliefs and they don't see anything wrong with their beliefs. You know, it was their understanding of how to make the world better. You get rid of all this dross, you get rid of things that don't match what you think should happen. You just get rid of it. And so that permeates. You just see it everywhere for those reasons. And it's so subtle, you know, that it's hard to defend yourself from it because the there's a fine line. It sort of is inching into another area I'm thinking of. There's a fine line between what happens in nature. I mean, if you can't take care of yourself in nature, you die. You know, I mean, that's just kind of how it is. There's nobody else to take care of you. If you're a lioness and you get kicked in the mouth, you die. You know, that's just, if you got cubs, too bad, you die. Um, and if you're born weird in nature with two heads or any of that kind of stuff, you die. You just don't live. It's not functional. As a society, we've begun to care for those who can't care for themselves. Although there's now research showing out that Neanderthals did that this is not new in terms of our own societies. But it is hard to care for those who can't care for themselves. It's expensive. It takes time and resources that would go to somebody else to take care of people who can't take care of themselves. That's just a fact. You know, and how we manage that and how we understand that is still a bit unsophisticated, I would say. We don't really understand how to discriminate ethically in those cases. Nature does not carry mutations forward. that aren't effective. No, she just doesn't. We do. And is that beneficial to our species? Is that truly beneficial? I mean, these are subtle arguments, and there's not clear yeses and nos. There's a lot of situational stuff, a lot of things go into it.
What?
And some of these kinds of questions are hit on in this whole Nazi stuff. I mean, he wanted an Aryan race, a pure race. However, he defined what that looked like. So people who didn't fit that category were shunted off to be burned up, to be gotten out of society, to clear, to make the society better. I mean, we've got all sorts of people who talk about this. Eugenics folks, all this kind of stuff. It's just that we take these biological truisms and we color them with our biases, and we're not able to discriminate between those two. And they get all mixed up in our heads. We get emotional things caught in there. We get rational things that seem like they make sense in there. All this stuff gets all mixed up, and it's hard to discriminate what is really for the highest good, both for the individual and for the species. And sometimes the individual takes a back seat for the species. That's a truism.
Say that sentence again.
Well, the individual takes a back seat to the species. You can sacrifice, an individual with characteristics that do not benefit survival for the species. For the species, you do want to sacrifice that. They should not be allowed to destroy the species because of characteristics they have. That makes a certain kind of sense. But how that actually works out, especially as we shift our culture, so it's not just nature, it's also us being able to do stuff. I mean, we've got the money, we've got the time, then why can't we take care of those people who wouldn't live otherwise? Why shouldn't we? Because we can. Do we want them propagating and creating more people like them? That's another question. And we've not answered that, frankly. So people with Down syndrome, people with other sorts of maladies can procreate. We are afraid to take that away from them. Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? We have not really engaged in these conversations. We've not really thought about it. We've just reacted to all of this kind of stuff. And it's created a big mess that people can use for their own purposes, because we all have emotional feelings about that. Some of us have thoughts about it, and they are just manipulated. I mean, we don't have any clarity about that at all. And
when I take personally what you're saying, because I try to take everything personally. I mean, I try to run through what I'm listening to. Self-care, love of self, self-love. When I love myself, I'm good to people. When I don't love myself, I'm not very good to people.
right, good, right.
So I've learned that when I love myself, when I take care of myself, when I pay attention to, when I realize I am responsible for me, I am responsible. And when I embrace that responsibility for me, which demands that I take care of me. I'm good to me. I'm a better citizen.
Yes.
I'm a good citizen.
Yes.
When I don't, I find fault. When I don't, something else needs to change. And
Yeah.
if I need to change it, I'll, whatever that takes. So what's your response to that as a,
Well, I think that's absolutely true. And when you're hurting, it's unlikely you're going to create safe spaces for other people. You're going to create spaces for other people to be hurt. And that's exactly what we've been doing. So this whole rhetoric about, oh, people have to, pick themselves up by their bootstraps and all this kind of stuff, that you don't want to mollycoddle people, all that kind of crap. Well, there's a thread of truth there. The fact that you are deliberately creating pain for others more likely ensures that they're going to want to continue to create pain. They don't have the capacity, the self-love. They've been taught they're not worth anything. I mean, that was Trump's whole childhood. You're just not worth anything. The only thing that you're worth is to do this. Your tendency toward kindness, your tendency toward niceness, get rid of that. That's not going to help you. It's not things I value. You've got to get rid of that. So creating more pain in others creates more pain, period. Yeah. And we got really good at that. I mean, that for me is a big part of war. It creates this pain. You watch your parents die, you watch your brothers and sisters die, and you're supposed to come out of that and love everybody. Give me a break. War really seeds that. It is just so hard to come out of that as a loving, warm, kind human being. Being scared every night because of the sounds around you, the bombs, things falling. I mean, how can you come out of that saying, gee, I love everybody? I mean, just, no. Shock and awe. Oh, wonderful. You've got a whole generation of kids now who are terrified and who are going to be more protective and afraid and not feeling good about themselves because they didn't have control. They couldn't change. They couldn't impact it. They couldn't save all the people that they lost, the pets they lost. So they don't feel good about themselves. I mean, we're creating those situations and they're wondering why it's a problem. It's nuts.
my upbringing was challenging, and I came out of that knowing to be of service to the world. And I knew to be of service to the world, I had to be whole. I had to be well. And I chose a profession that started with having a caseload of 85 girls who were incarcerated. And my work with them was for them to love themselves. And of course, I had to learn how to do that first. I had to dedicate myself to that, and I'm dedicated to that. And it's the only thing I know that works.
Mm-hmm. Part of that too, though, is being loved by others enough that you can go through those places where you don't love yourself.
Yeah, but that's not easy to come by.
I know. I'm not saying it's easy at all, but that's what we do for each other. That's why it takes a village. I mean, yes, there are people who can do it, I think, without that. I truly do. And I think
I'm one of them that can do
and
it.
I think they're old souls. It's just because you've been around long enough that you've learned to do that. It is way harder for younger souls to do that. They simply don't have the resources to do it. They really need others. I had a friend who really developed a technique where he could he and other people in the group could hold a person in the group accountable for things because they could love them through the destruction of their illusions. And that's part of it. We have these illusions about how and that's the whole narcissistic thing. The narcissist has an illusion about who they are, and they feel they're good people. And to make them realize that their vision of good was wrong, was not good, and to collapse through that into loving and forgiving themselves is not a quick or easy thing to do. And they have to have people around them who love them so much and who they trust to love them so much that they can walk that path. They can't just like do it. That doesn't happen. They have to have support to make that happen. And that's why we need each other. That's why community works. You know, community often doesn't heal, but it makes possible life. You know Joe's crazy, but it's okay. You don't make Joe not crazy, but he knows he's taken care of nevertheless.
But have compassion.
Yeah, I mean, he can't get over his craziness. You're not healing him in that way.
Meg Wheatley says compassion and insight.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because the
Well,
insight
and taking responsibility, I can't tell you how big that is. And that I think is the crucible for mankind, frankly. If we're going to get out of this, it's because we've taken responsibility. That's the only thing that's going to do it.
responsibility to unpack say more about taking responsibility. Where does it start? Starts with
It starts for recognizing you have responsibility for your own life. You're not a victim ever.
Exactly.
Ever. And that's huge.
That's the foundation.
Yes. Yes. But that's where health comes from. All of this stuff comes from. But you've got to get to the point where life happens and I'm going to deal with it. And I'm not a victim.
Right.
I'm just not a victim. Things happen. Yes. And I'm going to figure out a way through it. That's taking responsibility. We are so far from there as a species.
We haven't learned that.
No, well, and that's the thing. That's where we are.
Right.
If we take responsibility, or is nature going to be, you know, our enemy doing things to us? Or are we going to get on the bandwagon and work with her and be responsible, understand our responsibility, you know, which means saying no to ourselves sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Right on. I mean, this is really important what we're talking about here.
Yeah. I mean, that's the only thing that's going to save ourselves as far as I can see. I mean, we can trick ourselves. I do think that loving nature and working with nature and all of that is going to be a help. It'll give us time, but it still doesn't get to the root of it. We have to be responsible. We have to be responsible for our own lives and for our own understanding of what happens to us, of our response to what happens to us. We're not responsible for what happens to us. We're responsible for our response to what happens to us.
That's right.
And that has to be there. We have to get out of the blame game, period. You know, it's like even the word bad. I mean, things happen. Sometimes uncomfortable. Sometimes you don't like them. Sometimes they have consequences you did not. But bad is not really a good word because it makes you a victim. You know, it's somehow that it shouldn't happen. Well, that's a nonsensical kind of conversation. What do you mean it shouldn't happen? It did happen. There's just no way around it. It just is. Get over it and move on. Engage with it. You know, that we put all these resistances and justify these resistances instead of justifying engagement.
As a juvenile probation officer in Baltimore, I, with a caseload of 85 incarcerated girls to start with, I would have to do home visits and I would realize, oh my God, no wonder these girls are children in need of supervision. We
Yeah.
call them CINS, CINS, children in need of supervision. My God, this household, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Parents shouldn't be having kids like that. I mean, they create pain they don't intend to. They can't help it. They're so needy themselves. You know, they need stuff from their kids before their kids have anything to give. In fact, they have kids to give to them. I've heard girls say, I want a baby to love me. Well, it doesn't work that way.
exactly. Oh my God, I remember
Yeah.
they would get knocked up. They don't they don't even have a place to live, and they're knocked up now. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. And they want somebody to live them, and they think the baby will.
it doesn't work like that.
It doesn't work like that.
I'm so glad that I learned that I'm responsible for myself, and it's I'm not a victim of any. I'm not a victim. Yeah, and I kind of saw them as victims and living in households that they were raised in with the parents they were raised with, if they had any, you know, at home. But anyway, self
But they
responsibility.
really weren't. It was useful for me to hear somebody say that homeless people aren't homeless. They're having a homeless experience.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because that's what it is. It's a homeless experience. Now, what do you want to do about it?
Right.
And
It,
I think the same way with a lot of trauma.
yeah,
It's like, oh, it shouldn't have happened. Well, that's the nonsensical, it doesn't make any sense to say that. You had that experience. Now what?
right.
And it's not, the whole trauma thing is to prevent the integration of that experience. It's holding it out here. It shouldn't, it happened to me. I don't want it. I want to get away from it. I don't want to engage with it. And that putting it out there, putting all that energy and keeping it out there means that you can't take any responsibility. It's all out there, it has nothing to do with you. So you have no power over it. You only have
Very good.
power over it when you bring it into yourself
Very
and
good.
say, this is here. Now, what do I do?
Yes. I'm responsible for my life.
Yes, yes,
Nobody else is.
that's
And I'm
right. And
not
this is the
responsible.
life I want. I want it like this, and I'm going to make sure that this fits in a way that makes that happen. So I figure out how to make it fit. Yeah.
I I I'm I I count it as pure grace that I've never been institutionalized because I got it that I'm responsible for myself. You know, and that means that means don't do things that are going to get yourself locked up.
Well, and sometimes that seems like yeah, I mean, yes, this is not, it's not a panacea,
They,
especially in a culture that doesn't understand responsibility in that kind of way. I mean, it really, and we struggle with this. We do. And that's why we have a thing called manslaughter and all these other things. I mean, we say thou shalt not kill, and then we know there are all these places where it's messy. You kind of have to do that. And how do you manage that space? We don't know. We're not good at it at all. And we've got these little windows into it, but we don't understand how to bring that person back into the fold. I have been watching some of the shows, uh, and there was a time in this country, especially when the Wild West was there and stuff, where you could do a bad thing. You could be horrible in one place, and you could go to another place and totally turn your life around and be fine because there was no connection between those two. Well, that's disappearing. And it makes it really hard for people to lose that history and totally transform, even if they can. because they're brought into, well, you did that back then, you should pay for it. I don't know. I'm not 100% clear that that's true. Because if that person has changed, he has paid for it. Well, that's what you want him to do anyway. I mean, why punish him? I don't get it. He's done what you wanted him to do.
Right.
Applaud him.
Take responsibility.
Yeah, yeah. And we don't have a way to manage that in society. We still are caught in punishment and blame and all those. You got to pay for the bad things you did. Well, you don't if you've gotten over that, you've paid. You've done the work we wanted you to do. You don't have to have pain because you cause pain. If you get yourself over it, that's fine. And we don't have a way to make that happen. We just don't. As a society, we want to pull people back into that. They still have to pay, quote unquote. And it's like, anyway.
There's a statement about nature that's recent that I'm trying to remember, and I don't know how to access it, but nature takes care of itself. Nature finds ways to continue.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is about life. And if we really appreciated life when we saw it.
Say that again.
If we really appreciated life when we saw it. I mean, what you're saying makes me think of the example I just give. If somebody killed somebody over there and then they went to a whole different place and figured out why they did it and that they were never going to do it again, and they made a good life for themselves and they were a responsible citizen and all that kind of stuff, then why don't we appreciate that life? Why is it diminished? Because they did something over here. That was a learning opportunity. Yeah, it was unfortunate and all that kind of stuff, but they got out of that what they should have gotten.
Right.
What more can we ask?
Let's use that person as an example.
Why don't we appreciate that?
Doing what they did, helping people to do what that person did to get out of it.
Exactly. Yeah. Instead of saying, oh my God, they still did that. We have this thing about purity too. This is wonderful conversation around the founding fathers. So we rever Jefferson, we rever all these people who founded our country. They were slaveholders. So now what?
Right.
Do you throw it out with the bathwater? Actors and actresses who are wonderful, but they treat their kids abysmally, or they're alcoholics. I mean, there's all these facets to people, and we do not understand how to manage these really different aspects of the same person. We want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And there's got to be a way to say, I love you, even if, or I love you and you can't, but I love you. I value the value that you bar and bring. And that doesn't mean I have to accept the nastiness. I can still say no to that. Say no to that part of you without losing the value that you also hold.
And when you learn how to love yourself, this problem will go away. Because when we love ourselves, we're not going to harm other people. It doesn't compute. It doesn't happen. And unless we do something stupid and then we would say, oh, I'm so sorry, please forgive me. I'm not going to do that again. I mean, we can make mistakes.
Yeah.
But we have to we have to forgive ourselves and love ourselves.
Yep.
First and foremost. That's the answer to all of the social disruption we have. Loving ourselves. I'm so glad
and that means loving the ugliness too. That's the thing. Because a lot of times loving ourselves mean I love all the good parts of me, but I'm not going to acknowledge any of the bad parts of me. And you have to acknowledge all of that too. That all has to be there.
The bad parts of us are only parts. They're behavioral, or
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And their attitudes and their places to work on. It doesn't mean, yeah.
I spent a lot of money and a lot of years in therapy to help myself.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And I'm
Yep.
grateful. I'm so grateful. Yeah. So it's not complicated.
Well, I think it is complicated, actually.
But yeah, but the answer is simple. What the
Yeah,
answer
yeah.
is complicated, but part of it is you, you know, self-love is the starting point of all good of a good society.
Yeah. And creating the conditions that support life for me really speaks to that.
Yes.
That if we really hung on to that, we would begin to pay more attention to the implications of our actions than we do. And shift those so that they really do support life. That doesn't mean that people are allowed to do stuff. It means that we dampen that down in different ways, in ways that don't hurt.
The thought just occurred to me that you and I could, or maybe you already have started some forum, some group, some coming together to focus on, for the people who come together, to focus on this self-love theme, this self-love theme, and to talk about it, get to, I don't know how to do it, but I'd know how to do it. Because God wants it to happen. Nature wants it to happen. For
Yeah.
us to really,
I think that's a preschool with parents involved.
what? Preschool, what?
With parents involved. Because I found that kids really are very malleable in that way. You can do that, and then they go home and their parents tar and feather them all over again. I found that out babysitting, because I could get kids to be just fine, and then their parents would come home, and that the patterns that got the kids into the first place are patterns that the parents use for their own personal reasons.
Because they haven't learned to love themselves.
That's right. And it just, so I stopped babysitting. It was like too much.
There is a way. There's always a way.
There is always a way. Yep. And I applaud those people who have the bandwidth to do it.
Yes. This has been quite a conversation. Hallelujah. Nice.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's recorded,
Yes.
because I will listen to it again.
Okay. Yeah, we have about 15 people who listen to these every week.
Oh, 15?
Yeah.
Good, good. Hi,
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm always surprised, but yes.
Good. I listen. Yeah, and yeah, I do. Because I reinforce the good stuff that comes up
Yeah.
in my own life. I reinforce it.
Yep.
Thank
And
you
you're
for
welcome.
inviting this forum.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Okay. It's almost noon.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bless you. All right.
See
Bye.
you next week.
Okay, good. Bye.